1986, a diver searching for hammerhead sharks off the coast of a tiny Japanese island swam into something that shouldn't have been there. Beneath 75 feet of water sat a structure of stepped terraces, sharp right angles, and a flat, polished platform the size of a small stadium. For decades, geologists and archaeologists have studied it, and to this day, they cannot agree on a single thing. Not its age, not its purpose, and not even whether it was built by human hands at all.
The site is called the Yonaguni Monument, named after the small island that sits closest to it, the westernmost inhabited point of Japan, closer to Taiwan than to Tokyo. The official position, held by most geologists, is straightforward. Yonaguni sits in a region riddled with sandstone formations that naturally fracture along straight lines. Given enough time, currents and tectonic stress can carve flat plains and 90-degree edges without any help from human tools. Under this view, the monument is nothing more than an unusually photogenic rock formation, a geological accident that happens to look like architecture. This explanation is taught, repeated, and printed in textbooks. It is treated as settled. But the official story had a problem. The man who first surveyed the site in detail was a marine geologist named Masayaki Kimura from the University of the Ryukyus. He has spent more than 2 decades diving the structure, mapping it meter by meter. And what he found didn't fit the natural rock explanation nearly as cleanly as the textbook suggests. The terraces aren't just flat. They're arranged in a sequence of steps, each one cut at a consistent height, descending like a staircase carved for something far larger than a person. Kimura also documented features that are far harder to explain away. A formation resembling a stone road, a circular structure some have compared to a sundial, and, most strikingly, what appears to be a carved face, roughly human in proportion, set into the rock. But that wasn't the strangest part. Divers also found a series of holes drilled into the stone in straight, evenly spaced lines, the kind of pattern you'd expect from someone marking out a foundation, not from millennia of random erosion. Sandstone does fracture naturally, but it doesn't usually fracture into a grid. At around the 4-minute mark of any honest investigation into Yonaguni, you hit the detail that changes the entire conversation. The depth. The structure currently sits underwater at depths between 15 and 27 meters. For Yonaguni to have been built on dry land, which is the only way humans could have shaped it with tools, sea levels would have needed to be dramatically lower than they are today. According to most reconstructions of the last ice age, that sea level existed. Around 10,000 years ago, global oceans were low enough that the area where Yonaguni now sits would have been exposed coastline, or very close to, which means if this is a human structure, it would predate the Great Pyramid of Giza by roughly 5,000 years. It would predate Stonehenge. It would place organized stone construction in East Asia at a time when the standard timeline says humans in the region were still small bands of hunter-gatherers, with no evidence of large-scale building anywhere on Earth. That's the part that doesn't get repeated in the textbooks. Skeptics point out something real, too. No tools have ever been recovered at the site. No pottery, no carved artifacts you'd expect to find scattered around an ancient settlement. Nothing that conclusively says people lived and worked here. For a civilization advanced enough to cut stone on this scale, that absence is hard to ignore. But supporters of the man-made theory have an answer for that too, and it's almost as unsettling as the structure itself. If Yonaguni was built on land that was later swallowed by rising seas, then anything portable, tools, pottery, the people themselves, would have had thousands of years and rising tides to disperse, decay, or simply wash away. The only things left behind would be the things too massive to move, the stone itself. So which is it? The first theory is the conservative one. Yonaguni is a natural sandstone formation. Tectonic activity in this part of the Pacific is intense, and stress fractures really can produce straight edges and flat terraces. Under this view, human imagination did the rest, turning a striking rock formation into a lost city,
because that story is more interesting than geology. The second theory sits in the middle. Perhaps the formation began naturally, but ancient people, finding a structure that already resembled steps and platforms, modified it, carved into it, added the holes, sharpened the edges, shaped a face into stone that was already mostly there. A collaboration between nature and human hands, separated by thousands of years. And then there's the third theory, the one Kimura himself has leaned toward, and the one that has made mainstream archaeology the most uncomfortable. That Yonaguni isn't a modified rock formation at all, that it's the remnant of a structure, possibly part of a much larger complex, built by a civilization that existed before the end of the last ice age. A civilization with no name, on a coastline that no longer exists, that vanished beneath the Pacific as the glaciers melted and the water rose. If that's true, it means there is a chapter of human history, possibly an entire culture capable of large-scale stone construction that left almost no trace anywhere else. Not because it didn't happen, but because the only place it happened is now underwater, and we've barely begun to look.
Yonaguni has never been excavated the way a land site would be. No systematic dig, no careful layer-by-layer recovery, no controlled removal of sediment to search for what might be buried beneath the structure itself. It sits in open water, visited mostly by divers and documentary crews, debated in academic papers that rarely agree and almost never get resolved.
So the question isn't really whether Yonaguni is natural or man-made. The question is this: if there's a real chance that an unknown culture built something on that coastline 10,000 years ago, and the evidence is sitting right there under 20 meters of water, why has no government, no university, ever funded a full excavation of the site? The record was buried. We're digging it up.